Welcome to Workplace Psychology with Dr. Martha Grajdek. I'm Dr. Martha Grajdek. This podcast examines a wide variety of work-related issues through the lens of industrial and organizational psychology. And while many of the topics discussed here may be seen as intended for white-collar employees and their employers, in reality, the ideas presented here are applicable across organizations and industries. Additionally, many of the topics discussed here may be applicable outside of the workplace. I encourage you to examine what's presented here, apply what makes sense to you, and simply discard the rest. If you currently are or have been in the past in a role of middle management, or even if perhaps you know someone who is in middle management, then you may have some good ideas of what that role is like. Typically, there tends to be many responsibilities and many pressures from a lot of different sides. The bottom line when it comes to middle management positions is that it's a role that is sometimes taken for granted, but one that can be tremendously important to an organization. And while the role of middle management is by far one of the more critical to the organization, it is also one that is evolving and therefore not without its challenges and opportunities. One of the biggest challenges for middle management, and this is one that perhaps goes back to the beginning of the middle management role, is being able to balance the goals that are aligned with leadership and the organization in general and the needs of the team, those in the trenches, those on the front lines, so to speak. It is the middle manager that coordinates both sides and that works towards achieving all of the goals so that people from both sides of that middle management line feel that goals and needs are being met. And while it may not seem like a difficult task or maybe a big deal, if you've ever worn that hat of a middle manager, you know very well, you know personally from first-hand experience what a true balancing act that can be. One of the other challenges that many middle managers face is the simple lack of resources. When you are in a position where you have to balance a lot of different things and make sure that goals and needs are met for a wide variety of parties, there is a clear need for resources. Sometimes the organizations overlook that need and assume that somehow middle managers can magically take care of all the needs and goals without requiring anything extra to help them along. And of course, resources can look like many things, from equipment, software, training, people, to clear goals and directions. Resources can be represented by many different things, and a lack of any of those things can really derail a middle manager's efforts. Something else that middle managers often face as a challenge is a lack of training for themselves and a lack of training for those around them, whether that's their own team members or those in leadership positions. It is not uncommon that people get promoted from within an organization into the role of a middle manager without receiving proper training and without being truly qualified for that role of people management. And while many take on that role with plenty of enthusiasm, that alone is not always enough. Proper training is critical. We have seen many changes in the workplace in the last recent years, especially since the pandemic. One of the newer challenges that many of the middle managers face is the job elimination problem. All too often, companies simply eliminate middle management, especially if the workforce tends to work remotely or work from home. And while many organizations may not have taken the time to truly weigh the pros and cons of having someone in the middle management position, many assume that this is a good way of saving money. Nothing could be further from the truth, in that the role of middle managers is still a valuable one, especially when it is supported properly by the organization. Well-trained, well-supported, and well-prepared middle managers can make all the difference to the organization, not only in terms of the workforce, but also the organization's leadership and its bottom line. Now that we know some of the more common challenges that those in middle management face, let's look at how we can support middle managers so that they can be successful with all that they do. First and foremost, it is absolutely up to the organization, and by that I mean its leaders, to ensure that those in middle management positions are qualified to be there and have proper training, not only upon entry into that position, but also with the passage of time. Simply being with a company for a certain period of time, or simply working within a specific industry for a certain number of years, does not necessarily qualify someone to be in management position. It doesn't mean they have the people or management skills. It doesn't mean that they're qualified to lead a team. This is where organizations really have to pick up the slack and, one, hire the right people for the right jobs, and two, provide proper training. And training is not a one and done kind of experience. By all means, anyone hired into a middle management position should receive initial training from the organization to help to set that new manager for success. But beyond that, training needs to be provided on a consistent and regular basis as the manager moves forward in time within the organization. Keep in mind that training is equally valuable and important for new managers as it is for experienced managers. Now, the training may differ a little between the two groups, but training on an ongoing and regular basis is absolutely key. Make sure that those in management positions have proper resources, whatever those resources may be. As I already mentioned earlier, that could mean equipment, software, technical support, staff, enough talent on their team, training for themselves and their employees. So resources can mean many different things to many different people in the different companies and industries. It is up to those in leadership positions. It is up to the organization to make sure that resources are provided to ensure that people succeed in what they do within the organization. And again, sometimes those resources will be tangible things. Other times it will be things such as training. And while this responsibility falls largely onto the organization's shoulders, if you are in management and are not receiving the kinds of resources that you need, it is your responsibility to speak up and seek out the resources that you need to do your job. One last thing about resources. They're not limited to resources that would be perceived as being solely for the manager. They also could be resources for the team members. A well-equipped team, whatever the required resources may be, is one that allows the manager to do their job more effectively. As I mentioned earlier, those in middle management positions are often pulled in many different directions. They have a responsibility to many parties within the organization. They have to make sure that the organization and those within the leadership positions of an organization have their goals and their expectations met, but they're also responsible for making sure that those within the workforce, those performing the tasks, those that are part of the team, have all of their needs met as well. Beyond the straightforward need for resources of all sorts, anyone in middle management also needs to have clear expectations, goals, and needs, and a good understanding of what that means to everyone involved. So that means that those in leadership positions cannot be vague about what the goals, needs, and expectations of the organization are. The middle manager absolutely needs to know what they have to aim for in terms of achieving their goal on the behalf of the organization. In the same way, the same manager needs to know what the needs, goals, and expectations are for their team and team members. These are likely things that will be a combination of input from the individual employees, from the teams as a collective, and from the manager himself or herself. This means cooperation, collaboration, and communication. If you didn't understand the importance of those in middle management positions before today, I hope you're starting to see just how demanding and complex their jobs can be. There's truly an art to juggling and balancing everything that entails being someone in middle management. As we see more and more changes within the workplace and trends within the workplace, we have to be aware of how the position of a middle manager has to change and adapt to meet those needs. More and more people are working remotely, and more and newer technology continues to be introduced into the workplace experience. Those in management positions absolutely have to be able to keep up with all of these changes. And that takes us back to resources and proper training. And again, while resources and proper training can be seen as those required by the middle manager, it also pertains to all the training and resources that his or her team needs. When it comes to middle management, the bottom line is that there are a lot of things on the shoulders of that middle manager, and that means that the organization has to step up and support them appropriately. It is up to the organization to empower anyone and everyone within the organization, regardless of their position or title. But when we look specifically at those in middle management positions, it's easy to see how much support they actually need from the organization in order to be successful at what is required of them, what is expected of them, what it is that they do. So this is a call to action for every organization that has positions of middle management. And keep in mind, once again, that eliminating those positions is not an answer to anything. You are much better off as an organization properly supporting those in middle management so that they can continue to do what they do and help both the organization succeed, but also to keep the workforce at a place where they can be successful as well. As this episode comes to an end, let's review what was discussed. The role of middle management is a complex and involving one. There are a lot of moving parts, and a lot is required to empower anyone in that position to be successful. Middle managers are often pulled in many directions and are held responsible by both the organization and those in leadership positions, and also by their own teams and team members. So while middle managers face many challenges, it is absolutely up to the organization to make sure that their needs are met in such a way that they are empowered to do their jobs properly. Things such as resources and training are only part of what will help a middle manager to be a success. Clear expectations from both sides and being able to keep up with new workplace trends are critical for the success of today's middle manager. And while organizations have the bulk of the responsibility, middle managers are encouraged to speak up if they require training, resources, or other support from their organization. As the week unfolds, I encourage you to consider middle management within your organization. If you are in middle management, now is the time to consider, how is your job going for you? Do you have the support and resources that you need to do the best job possible? And if you are in a leadership position, make sure you're paying attention to what's going on in the world of middle management, both within your own organization and as far as global trends are concerned. After all, middle managers can be seen as the workhorses of the management team. Setting them up for success is an absolute no-brainer. For those of you who experience this podcast in an audio-only version, I encourage you to check out Stress Free with Dr. G on YouTube, where you can find the video version of this podcast. In addition to the podcast, you can also find videos that focus on stress management. So I encourage you to check out Stress Free with Dr. G on YouTube. The link for that is in the description below. Thank you for joining me today. Please subscribe to this podcast. I look forward to seeing you here again next time. Until then, I wish you joy and well-being.